The heavy oak doors of the great hall explode open. 300 alphas step back in the same instinctive reflex, like prey sensing a predator. I freeze. A massive shadow strides through the moonlight, a man built for war, his eyes burning silver amber as the air in the hall drops 10 degrees. My wolf detonates behind my ribs. Mate. The word slams through me like lightning. It's him, the stranger from the Forbidden Forest, the man whose heartbeat I memorized beneath the moon while my pack prepared to sell me for survival. He stops walking. His nostrils flare. He's hunting a scent, mine, the scent I scrubbed from my skin until it burned. The room goes silent as he stalks straight toward me, every alpha in the hall holding their breath. He stops inches away. Then his hand bolts out, gripping my waist and dragging me against the furnace heat of his body. The king turns to the trembling hall. Anyone who touches my queen. His teeth graze the pulse in my throat. Will die. And that's when I realize the man who saved me in the forest is the Alpha King the entire kingdom fears. If stories like this speak to you, like, subscribe, and leave a comment, so we don't lose each other in the noise. 24 hours earlier, I was still just a baker's daughter in a dying pack. My father told me while I was kneading bread. His shadow fell across the dough before his words did. I didn't look up. I already knew, from the weight of his breathing, from the way his boots stopped at the kitchen threshold instead of crossing it, from the 3-second silence that meant a decision had been made and my hands had not been part of making it. Pearl, you will attend the Alpha King's mating ritual. My knuckles whitened in the dough. The Crescent Moon Pack cannot survive another winter without alliance. I said nothing. The dough tore beneath my fingers. I'd been working it too long. The gluten had passed elastic and gone brittle, ruined like my morning, like my year, like every quiet plan I'd been building for a life that involved bread and herbs and the northern forest and exactly 0 Alpha Kings. You're offering me as currency, I said. He didn't deny it. In our world, denying the truth was weakness. I'm offering you as survival. 47 wolves. That was us, the Crescent Moon Pack, bordered by 3 larger territories that had been compressing our boundaries for decades. We weren't weak, but we were outnumbered, outfunded, and the kind of small that made larger packs forget we existed until they needed the land beneath our feet. My father's face looked like it had been carved from the same wood as our door frame, hard, weathered, holding something up. I wiped flour on my apron. When? Tomorrow? I nodded, walked to my room, closed the door, sat on the edge of my bed and pressed my palms against my knees and breathed until the shaking stopped. The stories about the Alpha King were not kind. They said he'd torn an alpha's jaw from his skull during a challenge and hadn't changed expression, that he kept no Luna because no woman survived proximity to his wolf, that his eyes shifted gold when he was angry and stayed that way for days. I didn't fear being chosen by him. I feared being overlooked, passed over for a bloodline daughter, then claimed by a lesser alpha who saw a Luna as a body that stayed quiet. That night, sleep didn't come, so I did what I always did when the world pressed too hard. I went to the forest. The Crescent Moon territory was small, but it was mine. Every root, every stream, every clearing where the moonlight pooled like spilled silver. I knew this forest the way I knew my own heartbeat, unconsciously, completely, with the body's deep familiarity for the ground it grew from. I was 20 years old. I could identify 37 plants by scent alone. I could bake bread that made grown wolves close their eyes and go quiet. I could read a political situation faster than men twice my age. My father had made sure of that, sitting me at his strategy table since I was 12, because he said a wolf who couldn't read a room was a wolf who would be eaten by one. None of it mattered, because tomorrow I was currency. Not a person, not a wolf, not my daughter. Currency. I got out of bed. If tonight was my last night of freedom, I would spend it in the only place that had never asked me to be anything other than what I was. Our territory's northern edge was all old growth, cedar and pine so dense the moonlight came through in silver threads. I walked barefoot. My wolf liked the earth, temperature, texture, the way different soils told stories beneath bare feet. She was calm tonight, a second heartbeat. I loved the forest at night. Not the dramatic, romantic version of love that the elders sang about, the quiet, structural kind. The kind where your body recognizes a place as fundamentally safe and everything loosens. Your jaw unclenches, your shoulders drop, your breathing deepens into the specific rhythm that means your animal brain has stopped scanning for threats. The forest was the only place that happened. Not my father's house, where every conversation carried the weight of pack survival. Not the council room, where every word was a chess piece. Not my bed, where I lay awake counting the things we couldn't afford and the alliances we couldn't secure. Here, barefoot on pine needles, the canopy filtering moonlight into silver threads, I was just Pearl, a woman, a wolf. A body moving through a space that accepted her without condition. I stopped at the ridgeline. The view from here showed our territory. Small, hemmed in on 3 sides, the borders marked by scent posts that needed refreshing every moon because we didn't have enough wolves to maintain them properly. 47. That was our number. Some packs had hundreds. The Alpha King's territory reportedly contained thousands. I was being sent from a world of 47 to a world of thousands. From bread and herbs and forest walks to... what? A banquet hall, a line of women in white, a king who killed alphas with his bare hands. I closed my eyes, breathed the pine, memorized the scent. Whatever happened tomorrow, I wanted to carry this night in my chest, this quiet, this freedom, this last moment of being only mine, until she wasn't. The scent arrived without warning, not gradually, sudden, as though a door between the trees had opened and the air from somewhere else rushed through. Pine smoke, iron, something darker, ozone before lightning, the breath of something ancient waking. My wolf surged, a full body lunge against my consciousness. I stumbled, hand catching bark. She pulled, toward the scent. My legs moved before I decided, barefoot over roots and stones with a precision that came from her, not me. The scent intensified. Pine smoke became campfire. Iron became the memory of blood. Someone who'd bled so many times the metal had become chemistry, and beneath it, warmth. Deep, living warmth radiating through cold air like a heartbeat made visible. I crossed a stream, climbed a ridge. I was no longer in my pack's territory. The rogues came from the left. 3 wolves, feral-eyed, lean, desperate. The first lunged. I dropped, instinct. His body sailed over me. The second circled. The third snarled, surrounded. My wolf, useless, not afraid, distracted. The scent was everywhere and heat flooded through me, not adrenaline, something hormonal. Starting in my core, radiating until my skin flushed and my vision blurred. My heat, triggered by a scent I couldn't name. The shadow came from the tree line. No sound. Movement. Fast, fluid, inhuman. First rogue turned, too late. Something hit him with the force of a collapsing wall. He went down like snapped wood. Second lunged at the shadow. The shadow caught him mid-air, 1 hand jaw, 1 hand shoulder, and separated them. Third ran. 3 seconds, then the shadow followed. 1 short sound. Silence. He stepped into the moonlight, massive. Not tall, built on a scale that suggested denser bones, layered muscle beyond specification. Dark hair. Jaw carved for war. Eyes catching moonlight with a silver-amber glow that was not human and not entirely wolf. Covered in blood. Arms, chest, neck, dark and steaming. He smelled like the end of the world. My wolf didn't howl. She dropped. Recognition. Mate. The word detonated. My heat erupted. Legs buckled. Vision tunneled. He felt it. I watched it hit. Pupils dilating, nostrils flaring, body going rigid with the effort of not moving toward me. But I was in heat. He was my mate. The moon was full. And instinct won. I should have run. The rational part of my mind screamed it. Run, you don't know this wolf. You are about to do something that cannot be undone. But the rational part was speaking from across a canyon. Audible. Irrelevant. What was immediate was him. He moved toward me the way weather changes. 1 moment distance, the next, contact. His hand found my jaw. Not rough, not gentle. Necessary. the grip of someone who has found the thing they need and cannot moderate. Calloused palm, hot, the temperature of a body running at a frequency the human range doesn't include. His thumb traced my jaw, ear to chin, memorizing my face with his hand. "Who are you?" he said, his voice low, dense, the kind you feel in your sternum before your ears register sound. "Pearl," I whispered. His mouth found the hollow below my ear, the junction where jawline meets neck. He didn't kiss. He breathed. Hot, unsteady breath against the most sensitive skin on my body. My spine arched. His arm came around my waist, anchoring, holding something he was afraid the wind would take, and the restraint mine tore. He lowered me to the forest floor. Pine needles and moss, cool against my back, the temperature contrast against his furnace heat making every nerve sing. He undressed me with shaking hands, the reverence of a man who understands that what is being revealed cannot be unrevealed. My dress caught on a branch, the hem tore. A small sound, neither of us noticed. Skin against skin beneath moonlight. His mouth traced my collarbone. Slow, deliberate, every kiss a claim. Not aggressive. Devoted. The attention of someone who has never had something precious and intends to know every inch before the world takes it away. My hands found his shoulders, dense muscle. Scars beneath my fingertips, the topography of violence. He found the pulse in my neck and stayed, his mouth hot against my heartbeat, his tongue tasting salt, his breath fracturing into something no longer controlled. "Pearl," he said against my throat. Not a word, a sound, the vibration of a voice breaking. I wrapped my legs around him. The weight of him settled, heavy, warm, impossibly solid, and resistance dissolved. He moved into me slowly, agonizing care. His hands cradling my hips, forehead pressed against mine, breath mingling, hot, synced, then the slow gave way. Not to violence, to urgency. The deep urgency of a bond completing itself. Two halves connecting, current rushing through with force neither could modulate. His composure broke. A sound against my shoulder, low, broken, from deep in his chest. The sound of a man who had carried something alone for a very long time and was feeling what it meant to set it down. I held him, arms around his back, fingers in his hair. When it softened, his forehead against mine, thumb tracing circles on my hip, I felt something I'd never felt. Complete. I traced a line on his chest. He shifted in sleep, drew me closer, mouth against my hair. A murmured sound that might have been my name. I fell asleep in his arms on the forest floor. I didn't know his name. I didn't know his title. Every cell in my body had chosen him. The forest held us like a cradle, pine needles beneath, canopy above. The moon, full, silver, witness. His body curved around mine, not possessively, protectively. The difference was in the placement of his arm, not around my waist, pulling me closer, but around my shoulders, shielding me from the cold air that moved through the trees like a living thing. I pressed my ear against his chest. The heartbeat there was slower now, the post-urgency rhythm of a body returning from somewhere primal. Each beat was heavy, deliberate, as though his heart was stamping something into the record of his blood. Mine, mine, mine. I could feel the bond settling, not the frantic, desperate pull of the heat, something deeper, structural. The way foundations settle into earth. The bond was not just connecting us. It was building something, a shared architecture that would outlast the night, the forest, whatever the morning brought. His hand found my hair, fingers moving through it, slow, aimless, the gesture of a man in the specific state of consciousness between waking and sleeping where the body does what it wants without consulting the mind. "Stay," he murmured. Not a command, a request, barely audible, the word of a man who was accustomed to ordering and had discovered something he could only ask for. I pressed closer. My answer written in proximity. That was enough. I woke once during the night, half conscious, his arm heavy around me, warm, the weight of something permanent. His breathing slow, deep. A rhythm I would come to know better than my own. a rhythm I would listen for through walls and corridors and the vast distance about to open between us. My cheek against his chest, the heartbeat beneath, steady, strong, a percussion I would search for through stone walls on nights when neither of us could sleep. I traced a line on his chest, no meaning, just my finger on skin because my hand didn't know how to stop touching him. He shifted in sleep, drew me closer, his mouth against my hair, and I said a small prayer, how I wish he was my mate and everything is normal. I don't have a choice, I can't be with him. But for now, I let myself absorb the moment in a stranger's arms. Forest dark around us. I felt something I had never felt in my careful, survival-driven life. Peace. Not the absence of fear, the presence of something larger. The presence of home. I woke to bird song in the absence of warmth. The space beside me, empty. Still warm. The moss held his shape, the scent lingering. Pine smoke, iron, that deep ozone warmth. Gone. Panic hit like cold water. I had mated, in the forest, with a stranger. The night before the ritual meant to save my pack. If any alpha scented another male on me, disgrace, death. I ran to the river, ice cold. I plunged in, scrubbed until my skin burned, washed my hair, submerged, erased him from my body the way you burn a letter you can't afford to keep. Every step south was a step away from the most significant moment of my life. My wolf was grieving, actually grieving, the way wolves grieve when they lose pack. At night during the journey, when camp was silent, I pressed my fingers against the place on my neck where his mouth had lingered, where my name had been spoken as the only word in his vocabulary, and I felt the loss of him like a phantom limb. The faction of my mind that remained rational tried to remind me, you don't even know his name. He could be anyone. But the rational mind was losing ground to the other thing, the deep, body-level certainty that whoever he was, wherever he went, he carried a piece of me with him, and I carried a piece of him. The bond doesn't care about names. It doesn't care about politics or pack status or the strategic calculations of desperate fathers. It cares about recognition, about two wolves whose frequencies match, about the specific, irreversible chemistry of finding the one person whose absence feels like a missing organ. I pressed my hand against my stomach during the journey, not fearing pregnancy. The timing was wrong. Feeling the phantom warmth, the ghost imprint of a body against mine. And I knew, with the certainty of someone who has touched fire and will never forget the temperature, that I would feel his absence for the rest of my life. My father forced herb baths, rosemary, sage, wolfsbane. You smell clean, he said. Clean. No alpha will smell another mate's claim on you.
I returned from dawn
as though destroying the
patrol
claim could be
gone.
reduced to hygiene.
The moss held her shape. The air held her scent, fading, like warmth leaving a room after a fire dies. My wolf erupted, not anger, anguish. The sound from my throat sent birds scattering for miles. I tracked her to the river. Water had erased everything. She had deliberately, methodically removed herself from my world. My wolf paced behind my ribs, back and forth. The internal equivalent of howling, a sustained, low-frequency anguish that vibrated through my bones and made my jaw ache. She had washed in the river. The deliberateness of it was what destroyed me. Not panic, not flight, but the systematic removal of evidence. She had chosen to erase me, had stood in freezing water and scrubbed herself clean of every trace of what we'd done, as though it meant nothing, as though I meant nothing. And the rage, the specific, helpless rage of a predator who cannot track what it needs, warred with something deeper, something quieter. Grief. I had held a woman beneath the moon and felt the world reassemble itself around a new center of gravity. For 6 hours, the weight I'd been carrying since I was 11, the weight of my mother's absence, my father's collapse, the throne, the wars, the specific loneliness of being the most powerful person in a room and the most isolated, had lifted. For 6 hours I hadn't been the Alpha King. I'd been a man, holding a woman, in the dark. And now she was gone, and the weight returned, heavier because I had felt its absence and knew what lightness tasted like. I stood at the river's edge, lost, A word I hadn't used since I was 11, since my mother. My mother found a mate bond stronger than my father's when I was 11. A rival alpha. Younger, crueler, with a pull that overrode the bond she'd made when she was 18. She didn't fight it, didn't try, she simply left. No goodbye. One morning the chambers were empty, and the scent of cedar and night-blooming jasmine was gone, and my father, the Alpha King, the strongest wolf in the territories, collapsed. Not physically, internally. I watched him go from king to ghost in 6 months. Watched the light leave his eyes. Watched decisions slow. Watched the empire weaken because the man at its center had loved a woman who used the bond as a doorway to escape. He never recovered. I never forgot. Standing at the river, I made a decision. I would return to the capital, conduct the ritual. Choose a Luna based on political value. I would not chase a woman who ran. I would not be my father. I would not be weak. My wolf howled in protest. I buried it, the way I buried everything, with iron, with discipline, with a cold understanding that survival required the elimination of vulnerability. But before I left the forest, I went back to the clearing. The moss, the moonlight, the space where she'd been. A piece of fabric caught on a branch, white linen, torn from the hem of her dress. I pulled it free, held it to my face. Her scent, faint now, fading, was still in the fibers. Lavender, warm earth, something sweet that had no botanical name. I folded the fabric, put it in my chest pocket. I told myself it meant nothing. I kept it anyway. I returned to the capital. The ride was long, silent, my wolf pacing behind my ribs with the restless fury of an animal confined. I told myself the forest was biology, chemistry, a mechanism, not a meaning. The mate bond was a tool evolution built to ensure reproduction, nothing more. A hormonal response triggered by proximity and scent compatibility. A system, not a story, but systems don't make the sound I made against her shoulder when control broke. Systems don't trace patterns on a sleeping woman's collarbone. Systems don't fold a torn piece of white linen and press it against their face in the dark. I was lying to myself with the sophistication of a man who does it professionally. At the capital, the preparations were already underway. 300 packs converging. The ritual hall cleaned and lit. 37 women in white being prepared by their families, bathed, scented, dressed, displayed, political currency, and somewhere among them, perhaps, the woman from the forest, the woman who tasted like rain on warm stone, the woman whose scent was lavender and warm earth and something sweet I couldn't name. The woman who traced my scars like she was reading Braille and didn't flinch at any of them. I pressed the torn fabric against my chest, through my tunic, over my heart. Then I ascended the throne and put on the face of a king who felt nothing.
The Alpha King's capital was not a city. It was a weapon, stone walls 40 feet high, architecture that was martial, not decorative. 300 packs gathered. The courtyard churned with bodies. I stood among 37 women in white, arranged like offerings, my hands steady, breathing regulated, scent blank, herb protocol. Inside, screaming. My wolf was stirring, the way a sleeping predator stirs when it smells blood. The doors opened with force, both doors, hinges groaning, war drum sound. He entered alone. The room stepped backward. Not a decision, a reflex. 300 alphas and 5,000 wolves responding to something their bodies understood before their minds caught up. Enormous, black, no crown, no ornament. My wolf detonated. Every nerve, every cell, all at once. Him, the forest, the moonlight, the hands, the mouth against my throat. The Alpha King. My wolf didn't just detonate. She collapsed. The way an animal collapses when it encounters something too large for its nervous system to process. Every instinct firing simultaneously. Recognition, desire, terror, joy. All of it competing for the same bandwidth, all of it screaming the same word. Mate. 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 The man I'd given my body to in the forest. The stranger whose hands I'd memorized, whose heartbeat I'd fallen asleep to, whose torn shirt still carried my scent in fibers he might have kept or might have burned, was the cruel Alpha King. The man I was most afraid, my whole head started spinning. The man my father sent me to be offered to, the man who ruled every pack in the territories, the man I was supposed to seduce for political advantage, and had already made it under moonlight before I knew his name. The irony was so precise it felt like the universe laughing. I locked my knees. The muscles in my legs were trembling, not from weakness but from the sheer electromagnetic force of the bond trying to drag me across the hall and into his arms. I bit the inside of my cheek. Copper, grounding. Don't move. Don't breathe differently. Don't let your wolf's frequency bleed through the herbs. But he was scanning the room. Nostrils flared, jaw set, and I could feel through the bond, through the connection that had been sealed on a forest floor under moonlight, that his wolf was searching. Not casually, desperately. With the focused intensity of a predator who has caught a scent and cannot find the source. And I was the source, hiding among 37 women, praying the herbs would hold, watching my mate hunt for me while I pressed myself deeper into someone else's pack scent. The cruelty of it hit me in waves. I locked my knees, bit my cheek until I tasted copper. He was scanning the room, nostrils flared, but he decided, at the river, in the forest, to ignore the bond, to be strong. Yet his wolf overrode the man. Our mate is here. The words passed through the room like subsonic frequency, felt in bones. He had claimed me that night. Even with the mask, the scent was faintly there. Beneath the herbs, below the scrubbing, the molecular signature of a bond sealed under a full moon. Women approached. One by one, each scented, each wrong. I watched from the back in terror, because my number was approaching and the herbs were thinning like mist under noon sun. My wolf's frequency bleeding through. 14, 20, 28. I tried to escape. He stopped the procession. No female leaves this hall. My mate is here. Gates closed, iron against iron. The hall sealed, and the herb wash, slowly, inevitably, wearing off. I watched from the back of the line, and my body became a civil war. My wolf, howling, clawing, screaming his scent across every nerve. Mate, mate, mate. The word repeating like a drumbeat, like the fundamental rhythm of something biological that didn't care about politics. And the rest of me, trained by a small pack to be invisible, fighting to suppress the signal. 29 women had approached, 29 rejected. I watched each one with two hearts. The human heart, terrified, calculating, mapping escape routes that didn't exist. And the wolf heart, watching him pace the platform with amber eyes brightening toward gold, and feeling not fear but an ache so deep it was physical. He was searching for me, and I was hiding. The cruelty of it. My mate, the man whose body I'd memorized under moonlight, hunting for me while I crouched behind another pack's scent. Because being found meant becoming the center of a political firestorm that a girl from 47 Wolves was not equipped to survive. But not being found meant losing him. And the losing, the biological ache of being 20 feet from your mate and choosing to remain hidden, was worse than anything the ritual could do. My wolf's frequency is bleeding through any moment now. I was terrified, and I was relieved. The hall erupted into calculation. Every alpha processing, true mate, here, find her first leverage. I pressed myself against northern ash women, heavy musk, cedar, their collective scent masking what the herbs couldn't contain. A man named Drakon, alpha of Iron Ridge, lean, restless eyes. He approached, sniffed. Eyes narrowed. You smell wrong. I smell like nothing. Exactly. No wolf smells like nothing. You've been scrubbed. He grabbed my arm. 2 wolves flanked. If you're what I think you are, you're worth more than every alliance in this hall. Remove your hand. He smiled. Make me. The sound from behind him was not a word, the subsonic vibration of the dominant predator when another animal touches what belongs to him. Room temperature dropped. Drakon turned, the Alpha King, 4 feet behind. Eyes no longer amber, gold, full wolf. Remove your hand from my mate. Drakon's hand left my arm. The king stood between us, focused entirely on the man who dared. You touched what is mine. I didn't know. You know now. He turned to me, recognition, not of my face, of my essence. The scent beneath the herbs, the claim from the forest bleeding through. You, he said. You were in the forest. I couldn't speak. You were the one who ran. He stepped closer. The crowd parted. He stopped close enough that his scent filled my lungs and my wolf went absolutely silent. How dare you run from your king and your mate? The whispers ignited. Small pack girl. She seduced him before the hunt. Trapped him. The bond can't be that strong to a nothing bloodline. The seduction rumors spread fastest. That I'd found the king before the ritual. Lured him. Trapped him with my body. But he was still looking at me. And beneath the fury, relief. The relief of a man who'd been searching and finally found. He reached for my hand, pressed it against his chest, turned to the hall. Anyone who touches my queen will die. He marked me in front of everyone, his mouth against the junction of my neck, a bite that left a mark that would darken for days, the bond activating. Ancient chemistry telling every wolf she is claimed. Sharp pain, then warmth, then something spreading through my veins like rewriting. I gasped, knees buckled. He caught me. I have you, he said. My father stood at the edge, his face, relief, terror, awe. He'd sent me to be claimed by a strong alpha. Not the alpha king. But I was thinking one thing. I want the tenderness from the man from the forest. Not the king, but the man from the forest is the king and he is ice over warmth. The palace was cold, not in temperature, in welcome. Every surface polished, every servant bowing. But the bows were mechanical, the smiles were architecture, and the whispers followed me like a second shadow. A low-pack girl. Our Luna. She seduced him before the hunt. Everyone knows. The Crescent Moon pack barely has 40 wolves. This is an insult to every bloodline. No one sat beside me at meals. No one spoke to me at court gatherings. The Alpha King's daughters from other packs avoided me, their silence more violent than any insult. Even the king kept distance, always watching, always cold, always controlled. He told me, "You are under my protection, nothing more." Nothing more. 2 words that landed like a door closing. The king gave me chambers, adjacent to his, the same architecture as the emperor's story. The barrier between us was a choice. He was furious, not at me, at himself. At the bond. At the fact that something he couldn't control had attached him to a woman he hadn't chosen. He was fighting the bond, fighting me, fighting the memory of the forest. I could feel it through the connection, the way he deliberately categorized his feelings. Duty, responsibility, strategy, locking the forest night in a box and burying it beneath iron discipline. At night, through the wall, I could hear him. Not words, the sounds of a man existing. Footsteps, the scrape of a chair, the rustle of reports he read until the candles burned to nothing. And once, just once, a sound that made me press my hand against the stone and hold my breath. A sigh, not the sigh of exhaustion or frustration, the sigh of a man pressing his palms against his eyes in the dark and thinking about something he couldn't stop thinking about. I knew what he was thinking about. The bond told me, not in words, not in images, in weather. His emotions came through as atmospheric pressure. His anger was a hot wind, his restraint was held breath. And beneath it all, constant, buried, denied, a longing so deep it vibrated at a frequency I felt in my bones. The mate bond doesn't lie. And what it told me, through the wall, through the stone, through the carefully maintained distance of a man fighting the most powerful force in our biology, was that Kyle Blackmare was in agony. And he would rather burn in it than admit he needed me. That knowledge was its own kind of torture. Knowing someone wanted you, feeling it in your blood, and watching them choose suffering over surrender. I pressed my forehead against the stone wall. Cool, the temperature of his indifference. Kyle.
She has been in my palace for 3 weeks, and I am losing my mind. I will not admit this. I will not say it aloud. I will write no record of it and confide in no living person. But the truth, the truth I carry like the torn piece of white linen in my chest pocket, is that Pearl of the Crescent Moon Pack is dismantling me. Not with weapons, not with strategy, with existence. I know her schedule now, not because I ordered surveillance, though I did, and the reports arrive every morning, but because my body has built an internal clock calibrated to her movements. She walks the eastern garden at dusk. She takes tea in the small courtyard at mid-morning. She visits the kitchens every afternoon, and the staff love her for it. That is the part I cannot reconcile. The palace staff, servants who have worked beneath alpha nobles for decades, worked beneath cruelty, beneath indifference, beneath the particular dehumanization of people who see service as beneath notice. They have served without complaint and without warmth because warmth was never offered. Pearl offered it. She learned the cook's name, Helena. She asked about Helena's daughter, who was ill, who needed herbs that the palace physician wouldn't waste on a servant's child. Pearl found the herbs herself, from the garden, brought them to Helena in a ceramic cup with instructions written in her small, careful hand. Helena cried. The head of household, a wolf named Marin, who has served 3 alpha kings and smiled for none of them, smiled when Pearl thanked her for arranging fresh linens. The stable master's son fell from a horse, broken wrist. The court physician was occupied with a senator's gout. Pearl set the bone herself, splinted it with strips of cloth torn from her own dress, the only fabric available, and held the boy's hand while the pain eased. The staff do not whisper about her the way the nobles do. There was a hierarchy of cruelty in the palace that I had never noticed until Pearl made it visible by refusing to participate. The noble women, daughters of powerful alphas, raised in courts, trained in the specific art of wielding status as a weapon, treated the servants as furniture. Not with violence. That would have been crude. With invisibility. They spoke over servants, walked through servants, referenced servants in the third person while the servant stood 3 feet away. Tell her to bring warmer water. Have that one remove the tray, Pearl said. Helena, would you mind warming this? Thank you. How is Marin's daughter feeling today? The difference was seismic. Within 3 weeks, the kitchen staff would do anything she asked. Not because she was Luna, not because of rank, but because she was the first person in their professional lives who had treated them as people rather than mechanisms. The head gardener, a wolf named Theron, who had maintained the royal grounds for 30 years without once being thanked, began leaving small arrangements of wildflowers outside Pearl's chambered door, without being asked, without being paid. The guards on her corridor, who had initially watched her with suspicion, began greeting her by name, not Your Majesty. Pearl. She didn't demand this loyalty. She earned it. Through the radical, revolutionary, apparently unprecedented act of being kind to people who had been taught that kindness was not part of their job description. And this quiet, domestic revolution happening beneath the court's notice, was building something in me I am not ready to admit. The staff whisper, She's the first Luna who has ever seen us. I know this because I hear everything in this palace, and because I cannot stop watching her. I keep the torn fabric in my pocket, the white linen from the forest, the piece that caught on a branch while I was undressing her beneath the moon. It has been 3 weeks. The scent has faded. I can barely detect her in the fibers anymore. But at night, when the palace sleeps and the reports are read and the lamp burns low, I take it out, hold it between my fingers, press it against my mouth, and I remember the way she tasted, the way she gasped though she didn't know my name, the sound she made when I found the pulse in her throat, the way her fingers traced my scars like she was reading a language no one had ever bothered to learn. I told myself the forest meant nothing. I told myself the bond was biology, chemistry, a mechanism, not a meaning, but I carried the fabric anyway, and I watched her anyway, and every morning I arrived at the strategy room early, not for the maps, but for the faint trace of lavender she left in the air when she passed through. I am the Alpha King. I command 12 territories. I have killed in 7 provinces and slept soundly after. This is becoming an obsession. I memorized her route the way I memorized troop positions, with the understanding that knowing every detail was essential for survival, This was not strategy. This was not protection, when she tilted her head left when listening to something genuinely interesting. She held her pen between her second and third fingers. Provincial habit. She arranged flowers asymmetrically, not decoration but architecture. She laughed rarely. But when she did, that short exhale, that brightness, the room changed frequency. The air itself seemed to lighten. I had heard her laugh exactly twice, both times for other people, neither time for me. And I wanted, with a hunger that embarrassed me, that I would never confess, that lived in the same pocket as the torn fabric from the forest. I wanted to be the reason. I wanted her laugh the way a starving man wants bread, not as luxury, as survival.
Pearl. A few weeks had passed, and I felt the most lonely I've ever felt in my life. I miss my home, I miss my mom and siblings. The man I came here for barely looks at me. I was at the balcony when he found me. A man named Cassian, Lord Cassian, the palace's head of security and training. Calm, intelligent, a face that communicated competence rather than threat. He bowed, not the mechanical bow of the servants, a real one. "Your Majesty," he said, "the gardens are far more beautiful in the afternoon. You should see them." It was the first normal conversation I'd had since arriving. Over the following days, Cassian became my guide. He taught me court protocol, pack law, the hierarchy of the territories. He met me in the gardens for tea, walked with me through the grounds, told me about the palace's history with the patience of someone who understood that knowledge was the only weapon I had. He never treated me like an outsider, and for the first time since the mating ritual, I felt like myself. One afternoon, he told me a joke about a northern wolf and a southern diplomat, and I laughed. Not the careful, controlled sound I'd been producing for weeks. A real laugh. Bright, warm, alive. I tapped his shoulder lightly as I laughed, and at that exact moment, I felt the bond rupture with fury. I looked up. The king stood on the balcony above the garden, his hands on the railing, his knuckles white, his eyes locked on the space where my hand had touched Cassian's shoulder. The next morning, Cassian was gone. No farewell, no explanation. His room empty, his name removed from every schedule, transferred to the northern border, the coldest battlefield, where wolves went to die fighting barbarians. I stormed into the king's office. "Why did you send him away?" He didn't look up from his desk. "The North needs him. There are hundreds of warriors at the North." His eyes lifted, calm, cold. Dangerous, not like him. He was my only friend. Something flickered in his expression, jealousy, possession, buried before it reached his face. "Then perhaps you should choose your friends more carefully." I stared at him, and something I'd been holding together, through the ritual, the marking, the palace, the isolation, the whispers, the cold words, the averted eyes, broke. "Why are you mean to me?" Raw, uncontrolled. Not a queen's voice. A girl's voice. The girl from the small pack who needed bread and walked barefoot in forests and never asked for a throne. "I thought you cared about me. Do you ever think about the night in the forest? Did you feel anything? Or did you just see my heat and claim me out of convenience?" Tears. I couldn't stop them. "We are fated mates, and I can't understand why you marked me to put me through this pain. Why keep me here if you can't stand to look at me?" The room was silent. He looked at me, and for one fraction of a second, the mask cracked. Beneath it, something wounded, something raw. A man watching himself hurt the person he wanted most and being unable to stop. The mask reassembled. "Do your duty," he said, level, cold. "I marked you out of responsibility, nothing more." I left. The tears didn't stop until my chambers.
The desk cracked beneath my hands, both palms flat, wood splintering. I pressed my hands against my eyes and breathed like a man who had just driven a blade through his own chest. She asked if I think about the forest. I reached into my pocket. The torn fabric, white linen, her scent, almost gone now, almost. I pressed it against my mouth, but the memory it anchored, that was permanent, carved into the same bone that held my mother's absence and my father's collapse. A memory that sat beside those wounds and contradicted them. Because my mother left. Pearl left too, but had come back. Not to the forest, but to the ritual. To the hall, to the same room as me. The bond had brought her back. I set the fabric down, picked up a report, read the same line 7 times without absorbing a single word. This was my life now. Days of cold control, nights of fabric and memory, and the specific self-hatred of a man who knows he is hurting the only person who matters and cannot make himself stop. I cause it every day, every cold word, every averted gaze, every time she enters a room, and I force myself to look elsewhere, at maps, at reports, at anything that isn't the way the light finds her collarbone or the way she tilts her head when she's thinking. I am hurting her systematically, deliberately, with the precision of a man who understands exactly what he's doing and does it anyway, because the alternative is loving her. And my mother loved my father, and she left, and he died, and I swore on the grave of the man he became that I would never give anyone that power over me. Pearl is that power, and I would rather watch her flinch than risk becoming a ghost. The palace nights were the worst. Through the door, her sounds, not words, the sounds of a woman existing, footsteps, water pouring, the rustle of fabric as she prepared for bed, and once, just once, the sound that made me press my palm against the wood and close my eyes. She was crying, not the audible kind, the silent kind, the kind you only detect if your hearing is wolf-calibrated and your entire nervous system is attuned to one person's breathing patterns, shallow inhales, controlled exhales, the rhythm of someone crying while trying not to make a sound, because of me, because I had said, because of me, and meth, old exhales, and I said in my life and told it that it wasn't precious, against the door. My wolf, not the angry howl, not the territorial howl, the one wolves make when pack is in pain and they cannot reach them. I could reach her. The door had no lock. 3 steps and I would be there. 3 steps and I could hold her and confess that every cold word was a lie and the torn fabric in my pocket was proof, and I was not strong. I was terrified. I did not take the 3 steps. I stood at the door with my forehead against the wood and listened to her cry and felt something inside me crack that I was not certain would heal.
He brought me to the Southern Alpha Council. Wouldn't leave me in the palace, not after the whispers. Not after Cassian. He told himself it was strategy. I sat across from him in the carriage for 6 hours. He didn't look at me once. I folded my hands in my lap because the alternative was reaching across and forcing him to acknowledge I existed. That evening, I confronted him. Why did you bring me? You barely look at me. You can't stand being in the same room. He was unpacking, didn't turn. You don't irritate me. Then what am I to you? For 1 second, one unguarded fraction, his eyes held something that contradicted every cold word he'd ever spoken. Then it was gone. You are the Luna. You attend where I attend. Luna, I repeated. A title, not mate, not wife. Yes. Did you feel nothing? Was I just heat and convenience in a body in the dark? Silence. Answer me. There is nothing real. Stop dreaming. I left past tears, in the cold, flat territory where hurt becomes armor. Next day, after the formal session, the alphas gathered to drink. He brought me. Couldn't not bring me. 3 Eastern alphas noticed. Brother. One grinned. You brought your Luna to a war meeting? She goes where I go. She goes everywhere you go. Council, lodge, drinking table. The alpha leaned forward. You're addicted. The great Kyle Blackmare can't let his little Luna out of sight. I watched his jaw tighten. The amber flickered. Relax, another said. It's not that deep. Later, a Western Ridge alpha flirted openly, held my hand too long, complimented my scent. Kyle gripped the man's wrist and twisted until bone creaked. Touch my queen again. I removed the hand, control cracking publicly. The cold king becoming something territorial and barely contained. I watched it happen, the slow, visible disintegration of the coldest man in the territories. It wasn't dramatic, it was incremental. The way ice melts, not in a crash, but in a steady surrender to temperature. He positioned himself between me and every door in every room. Not consciously. His body arranged itself as a wall between me and anything that could be a threat. I would turn a corner and find him walking the opposite direction, as though he'd materialized from the specific obsession of a man who needed to know where I was at all times. Through the bond, I registered his obsession the way he cataloged everything about me. A few days together in the South, I learnt his anger was a hot wind, the kind that precedes brush fire. It came through when advisors challenged him, when senators postured, when the political machinery of the court ground against his patience. His restraint was held breath, the atmospheric pressure before a storm that never breaks. It was constant. Permanent. The background frequency of a man who is holding everything in with the specific muscle group you develop when holding things in is your primary survival strategy. And beneath both, always, longing. Not the sharp, urgent kind, the deep kind, the kind that vibrates at a frequency so low you feel it in your bones before you hear it in your ears. The sustained, aching, relentless pull of a man who wants something he has decided he cannot have. I felt it through the carefully maintained distance. And the cruelty of it, the specific, exquisite cruelty, was that I felt him wanting me while I listened to him deny me. Every cold word, every nothing more undermined by the longing vibrating through our shared nervous system. He wanted me, constantly, through every averted gaze, every measured distance, every careful arrangement of his body to avoid proximity. We returned to the palace at dusk. That night I had a brutal nightmare. My father, the pack, fire, wolves everywhere. I woke screaming. The door hit the wall like thunder. He was there, bare chest, eyes wild, not the controlled imperial wolf, the animal, the mate protector who heard his bonded scream and moved before the man could intervene. 2 strides, sat on my bed, hand on my face. "You're safe," he said. I was shaking. Not from the dream. From his hand, calloused, warm, the same hand that had mapped my body under moonlight. I leaned into his palm, his arm came around me, drew me against his chest. Heat wrapped around me like a second skin. I pressed my face against his shoulder, breathed him in. He held me until the shaking stopped. Then we both pretended it meant nothing. A rival Alpha Lord, Varric of the Blackstone Pack, had been watching. He'd seen the arm twisting, the teasing, the way the Cold King became a different creature when his Luna was threatened. A crack in a perfectly made self. An exploit. Control the queen, control the king. The attack came from inside the palace. Not rogues, not warriors. Noble women. 3 daughters of Alpha Lords. Women who believed the queen's position was rightfully theirs. They cornered me in a corridor between the library and the eastern wing. "You don't belong here," the tallest said. Daughter of the Iron Fang Alpha, silk dress, perfect posture, eyes like a snake's, low-pack whore. The second one grabbed my arms, pinned them. The third drew a silver blade from her sleeve, small, concealed, the kind designed for a single decisive wound. "The king will recover. He'll forget you within a moon cycle, and a real Luna will take your place." The knife entered below my ribs. Silver burns, not like fire, like acid eating from the inside. I went down, marble cold against my cheek, blood spreading, warm, dark, pooling beneath me. Then I heard him. Not words. A sound. The sound a wolf makes when the thing it's bonded to is bleeding. A roar that was the earth splitting. He arrived in wolf form. Massive, black, gold eyes. Shifted mid-stride. Human body emerging from the wolf like a weapon unsheathed. 2 of the women didn't run fast enough. The third he held by the throat. "Who sent you?" She named Varric, the rebellion. He dropped her. She lived. Then he turned to me.
I carried her to my chambers, not the medical wing, my chambers, because I could not. In that moment, with her blood warm on my hands, and her breathing shallow, and the bonds screaming at a frequency that was tearing my skull apart, I could not let her be more than arm's reach away. I laid her on my bed, called the physician, stood back while he worked, extracted the silver, cleaned the wound, stitched the tissue. I watched. Every stitch. Every flinch she suppressed, every breath that came harder than the last. When the physician finished, I said, "Leave." He left. I sat beside her, basin of water, clean cloth. I began cleaning the blood from her skin, The dried blood on her arms, her hands, the smears along her collarbone. Slowly, carefully, the way you handle something that could break if you breathe too hard. My hands were shaking. She opened her eyes, looked at me, at my hands, trembling, cloth turning pink with her blood. "You're shaking," she said. "No, you're shaking, Cale." "I need you to understand something," I said. She waited. Blood on my hands, hers, the bandage under my fingers, the silver wound pink and healing. Every cold word I said to you was a wall I was building. Not against you, against what you make me feel. Because the last time someone made my father feel this way, she used it as a doorway to walk out. "I am not your mother," Cassian had told me about her. "No, you're not." Because she never said a stable boy's broken bone. She never learned the cook's daughter's name. She never stood in front of 300 wolves and refused to flinch when they called her nothing. I dipped the cloth in clean water, wrung it, returned to her skin, the dried blood along her collarbone, the smears on her arms. "The staff love you," I said. "I've ruled this palace for 7 years. They've obeyed me. They've feared me. They've respected me." I paused. "They love you. Because I see them. You see everyone. You see Helena and Marin and the stablemaster's son. You see the servants the nobles walk past. You see the guards the court ignores." I set the cloth down, looked at her. "You see me, the man behind the king, the one who keeps a torn piece of your dress in his pocket and reads it like a prayer." Her hand found my face, thumb against my jaw. "That man is the one I fell in love with," she said. "Not the king. The man from the forest who made a sound against my shoulder like he'd been carrying something heavy his whole life and was finally putting it down." I was. "What were you carrying?" "Loneliness. The specific kind that comes from being the most powerful person in every room and the most isolated." She leaned forward, pressed her lips to my forehead, the way you seal a promise. "You're not alone anymore, if you would let me," she said. "And I, the Alpha King, commander of 12 territories, a man who had not cried since the morning his mother's chambers were empty, felt something hot and involuntary streak down my face. She wiped it with her thumb. Neither of us mentioned it. But I knew in that moment that the war I'd been fighting against the Bond was over. Not because I lost, because I finally understood that surrendering to Pearl was not weakness. It was the bravest thing I'd ever done. I set the cloth down, pressed my palms against my eyes, drew a breath that tasted like iron and the specific kind of fear that only comes when you've almost lost the thing you refuse to admit you needed. "I tried to stay away," I said. She was quiet. "I tried to treat you like a responsibility, like a political asset, like something I could manage from a distance without it touching me." My voice broke. Not dramatically, just a fracture, a hairline crack in the controlled monotone I'd maintained for 7 years. "But I can't breathe in a room where you aren't smiling." She stared at me, tears, not from pain, from something else. "There it is," she whispered. "I've been waiting for that." "For what?" "For you to stop being the king and start being the man I fell in love with." Over the next few days she recovered. I barely spent 20 minutes outside my room. One evening I stayed late after the pack meeting, but when I got into the room I found her sitting in the dark waiting. I asked her if she was okay. She said she is good. "Then why aren't sleeping?" "I can't sleep. I was worried about you," she said. I kissed her, not the desperate instinct-driven contact of the forest. Deliberate, a man choosing to close the distance he'd maintained for weeks. "You're injured." "I'm healing." "Pearl." "Don't stop." I didn't stop. I undressed her slowly. Not the forest urgency, something refined by weeks of restraint, jealousy, and the devastating realization that the woman in my bed was not a political asset but the person I would burn civilizations for. I removed the bandage, kissed the skin beside the wound, the pink healing edge where silver had entered. My lips against the evidence of her vulnerability. "I should have been there," I whispered. "You came. Not fast enough." My mouth traced from wound to collarbone, to the mark. My mark darkened, permanent. I kissed it, felt the bond pulse beneath my lips. She reached for me, drew my shirt over my head. Her fingers found the scars, every ridge, every line, the geography of a life measured in violence. "How old?" she asked, the one on my shoulder. 17, my first kill. This one, the burn on my ribs. Northern Campaign." She pressed her mouth to each scar, claiming them, making them hers. I shuddered. The Alpha King, feared, unbreakable, shuddering beneath a small pack girl's mouth against his scars. I lifted her carefully, aware of the wound, carried her to the center of the bed with the reverence of a man handling something sacred. I kissed her wrists, where pulse beat fast. "Faster," I murmured. "Yes, because of me." "Yes." I lowered over her, the weight of me, not crushing, anchoring, the gravity she'd been missing. My mouth found the hollow of her throat, breath against her pulse, warm, unsteady. For the first time in 7 years, I was not in control, and I did not want to be. She said my name. "Cale." I went still, the way air stills before the most devastating part of a storm. Then I moved, not urgency but devotion, the attention of a man applying everything he'd learned across months of watching, wanting, denying. My composure broke. What came through? Not violence. Something raw, almost pained. A sound against her shoulder, low and broken. The sound of a man who'd held himself together for 7 years and was finally letting go. She held me, arms around my back, fingers in my hair. Afterward silence, not empty, full. The way a room fills with light occupying every corner. She lay beside me and I felt the slow deceleration of my own breathing, from jagged to steady. The rhythm of a man who had finally set something down after carrying it since he was 11 years old. She traced a pattern on my chest. Not a word. Just the slow repetition of a hand that didn't know how to stop touching someone it had been forbidden to touch for weeks. "You're drawing on me," I said. "I'm memorizing." "Everything?" "Yes, everything." I caught her hand, brought it to my lips, pressed my mouth against her knuckles. Not a kiss, a promise. "You'll have time," I said. She pressed her face against my shoulder, breathed me in. And the feeling, the simple, devastating feeling of another person choosing to press their face against your skin and breathe, was worth more than the throne. More than the territories. More than every victory I'd ever claimed. "I want to stay in this room," she said. "We have a rebellion to crush. That's why I took time in today's meeting." "Let it wait." "It can't." "Then let me have 5 more minutes." I held her tighter. "Take 10, she smiled against my shoulder. I felt it, the curve of her mouth against my skin, and the last locked door in my chest swung open. Afterward, my bed, her head against my chest, the mark pulsing in sync. "I lied," I said. "About what?" "Everything, duty, responsibility, nothing more." I reached into the bedside drawer, the torn fabric, white linen from the forest. I held it up. She stared at it. Her eyes widened. Her hand went to her mouth. "You kept it," she whispered, "since the morning you left. I carried it every day, in my chest pocket, against my heart." "Why?" "Because I am a man who told himself the forest meant nothing while carrying the evidence against his own chest." Silence. "I think about the forest every night, Pearl. Every morning. Every time you walk through a corridor and your scent reaches me before you do. I sent Cassian away because you laughed for him, and I wanted to be the reason you laughed. I said cruel things because the alternative was admitting that the bond had won, and I was terrified of becoming my father." She took my face in her hands. "You are not your father. You don't know that. I know that your father's Luna left. I'm still here. After everything, the cold, the silence, the cruelty, I'm still here. Because I fell in love with you in the forest before I knew your name. And I fell in love with you again in this palace when you held me through a nightmare and pretended it meant nothing. It meant everything. I know. That's why I stayed."
In the days after, I felt the palace shift. I heard Cale laugh, not the controlled almost smile I'd grown used to, but real, deep laughter. It happened when I argued with him about troop positions during a strategy meeting. I didn't defer, and I didn't cower. I spoke with the flat authority of a woman who had stopped being afraid of the most powerful wolf in the territories. I stood up to him constantly. He deployed 12 guards to my corridor after the attack. Maids, watchers, escorts. I faced him down. Stop treating me like something fragile. You were stabbed, he reminded me, and I'm standing. 3 guards, Kael. I walk the garden alone. With a weapon, stop treating me like something so fragile. I've carried a weapon since I was 13, I said. Not everything from the Crescent Moon Pack is small. He almost smiled then. I felt something that had been locked in his chest for 7 years open just a little further. We trained together. We sat through strategy meetings and war planning. I read the political landscape the way my father taught me to read geography, as a narrative. Kael watched me, and his watching was no longer surveillance. I handled the palace staff with a kindness that I could tell made the alphas who came before me look hollow. The servants didn't whisper about me the way the nobles did. They whispered, "She is the first Luna who has ever seen us." I was a bread-kneading, barefoot-walking, herb-knowing woman from a pack of 47 wolves, and I was transforming his palace simply by treating people like they mattered. I built something Kael never managed with all his power. Loyalty, the real kind, the kind that doesn't come from fear. Varric's rebellion came with fire and teeth, 8 packs, hundreds of wolves. The accusation the king was weakened by an unworthy bond. Kael assembled his army, 200 wolves against 400. The numbers were massive. The battle began at dawn. The capital walls held, barely. Kael fought at the front, a relentless black wolf. I refused to hide. "I fight beside you," I told him, "always. You were stabbed days ago." "Always," I said. It was the word he had asked for, the word I had given. The first wave broke against the walls. The second pushed through. Kael's lines buckled. Varric found him, alpha against alpha. The ground shook. Kael took a blade to the side and went down. Varric stood over him, sword raised. I shifted. I am a silver-white wolf, small, not a warrior's build. But I hit Varric from the side, my teeth finding the tendon behind his knee with surgical precision. He stumbled. It was enough, but not enough. He recovered and turned on me, 3 wolves flanking him.
The horn came from the north, not a palace horn, a mountain horn, the deep blast of the wolves stationed at the ice border. Cassian rode at the front with 200 northern soldiers, battle-hardened and fresh, the wolves I had unknowingly cultivated with kindness. Cassian hadn't forgotten. He remembered the Luna who treated him like a person and laughed with him in the garden. He hadn't come back to steal the queen, he had come back to save the king. The northern wolves hit Varric's flank like a hammer. Cassian fought through to me. We stood shoulder to shoulder, 2 men separated by jealousy, brought together by war. "You came back," I said, blood on his face. "I never left," Cassian answered. "I serve my king, and I serve my queen. You have showed me what loyalty looks like, the kind that's earned, and I will keep that in mind." Varric fell. The rebellion collapsed.
The battlefield went quiet. I shifted back, standing among wolves 3 times my size with blood on my muzzle. I realized then that I was not fragile. Knowing it and proving it are different things. The proving happened when I sank my teeth into Varric's tendon and didn't flinch at the taste of blood. I had chosen to stand between the king and the blade aimed at his throat. Kael found me on the field. He was bleeding from his side, but he walked to me and stopped. To him, in the dirt and blood, I was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He reached for me, not with a possessive grip, but a true embrace. He buried his face in my hair, breathing in lavender and warm earth. "Don't ever do that again," he said. "Which part?" "Any of it, the shifting, the fighting." "You were on the ground," I reminded him. His sword was raised. "I would have survived. You wouldn't have." He pulled back and looked at me. He saw my certainty. "You saved my life," he whispered. "You saved mine first, in the forest, the rogues." That was instinct. So was this. He kissed me then on a battlefield in front of 5,000 wolves. It was the most honest kiss we would ever share. Epilogue. 3 days later, I stood on the palace balcony beside the king. 5,000 wolves cheered below. They cheered because they'd watched a small pack girl fight. Kindness had won the war, not strategy. Kindness. Kael found Cassian afterward. "I owe you an apology," Kael said. "You owe me a drink," Cassian replied. I sent you north because I tried to keep your Luna comfortable and buy you time to tell yourself the truth that you are madly in love with your Luna and she doesn't know the exact intensity. He laughed and you lost your mind. I know. Cassian looked at him. She was never mine to want. I would ride through a blizzard to defend that. Kyle extended his hand. The grip was real. I found Cassian in the courtyard and embraced him as a friend. You came back, I said. Your Majesty, I never stopped being your friend. I just had to do it from a distance for a while. I laughed and Kale, watching from above, felt only gratitude. He understood now what his father had gotten wrong. His father loved a woman who took. I was a woman who gave. Love didn't make Kale weak, it made him worth fighting for. My softness wasn't a weakness, it was a weapon. That night in our chamber, Kale held me. I ruled this kingdom alone for 7 years, he said. Now I finally understand what it means to have a home. I kissed him. Love, every morning, every night. I love you, he whispered. It sounded like a surrender, the good kind. I love you, I answered. I loved you in the forest. I loved you when you were cold. I loved you when you held me through the nightmare. We both laughed then, the kind of laughter that comes when you can finally admit the truth. He held me, and the sound filled the room. Outside, the same moon that watched us in the forest rose over the kingdom. The end. If this story caught your attention, thank you for staying with me. Stories like this take heart to write, and knowing someone is truly listening makes all the difference. I write to stir something inside you. Romance, emotion, and moments that linger long after the story ends. If you enjoy stories like this, please subscribe and comment where you are watching from, so these stories don't get lost in a sea of voices, and I can keep writing them for you.